With the release of Tarkir Dragonstorm, flying fire-breathing lizards are once again front and center on players' tabletops. Arguably no other set has celebrated the species quite so affectionately, not even Dragons of Tarkir, and certainly not the underwhelming Scourge. Dragons have been a part of Magic since the very beginning, and understandably so. The game, at least in its early years, combined trading cards with tabletop-inspired strategy, packaged within a high fantasy aesthetic, and nothing is more emblematic of the fantasy genre than the dragon. Magic's very first dragon showed up in Alpha. At the time, Shivan Dragon was power incarnate, a mythic rare before mythic was a thing. It established the baseline. Dragons in Magic were red and big and scary, but they were also predictable. In early Magic, most dragons followed this pattern. Wrathy dragon, volcanic dragon, two-headed dragon. They were threats, not characters. Tools of carnage, not personalities. In this regard, Shivan Dragon is more than just a card. It's a cultural artifact in MTG history. It's bold, red, and fearsome, but also nostalgic, symbolic, and strangely poetic in how it shaped the early game. For starters, it was one of the most coveted creatures among early Magic players. It wasn't just powerful, it was the embodiment of the fantasy Magic promised. Summon a massive, flying, fire-breathing beast, and burn your enemies to ash. Before Black Lotus and Ancestral Recall became the symbols of power, Shivan Dragon was the Magic card everyone knew. It appeared in promotional materials, starter packs, and flavor text callouts. In a sense, it was Magic's first dragon brand mascot, long before Nicol Bolas or the Dragon. Ask a 1994 player what Magic is, and they might show you a Shivan Dragon. A lot of this comes down to the imagery. The original art by Melissa Benson is among the most famous in Magic. Her Shivan Dragon is simple but otherworldly, coiled, sinewy, looming in front of a volcanic sky. The texture, the musculature, the ambiguous expression, it's all equal parts terrifying and majestic. It also looks like an alien apex predator, burning with mana and mystery. Benson later revealed that she painted it in a cramped student apartment, unknowingly etching herself into trading card history. Reimagining the art of such a beloved card is no easy task, but Donato Giancola did an amazing job with his version of Shivan Dragon for 7th edition. He illustrates it with a more scientific perspective, adding a believable anatomy to the fantastical beast. Donato was also mindful of Benson's original, intentionally crafting his artwork to echo the legacy of that first depiction, while also pushing it in bold new directions. The result is a piece bursting with movement and dramatic flair. In terms of mechanics, Shivan Dragon introduced fire breathing, the ability to pay red mana to boost power until end of turn. This effect became shorthand for red dragonness across hundreds of later creatures. It codified the mechanical identity of dragons in Magic. They fly, they burn, and they scale their damage. Today, Shivan Dragon is outclassed in competitive play. New dragons are cheaper, more efficient, more synergistic. Nevertheless, Shivan Dragon persists. Not in top-tier decks, but in starter kits and hearts. It's been reprinted over 20 times, particularly in core sets, most recently Foundations, meaning that it continues to be one of the first big creatures new players are introduced to. Over this time, it's become less of a threat and more of a symbol of Magic's roots, of how far the game has come, and what it means to fall in love with dragons. Although most of Magic's early dragons hewed to Shivan Dragon's prototype, the game introduced a new form of dragons in Legends, with the cycle of triple-colored Elder Dragons, including an unassuming Grixis one named Nicol Bolas. Things got even more creative in the early 2000s with Invasion and Planeshift. which gave us the first wedge-colored dragon cycle, like Croesus the Purger and Daragaz the Igniter. These dragons weren't just damage dealers, they had identities. Then came Kamigawa's spirit dragons, Jugan, Kaiga, Kokusho, all of whom died into effects. Then later there was Ravnica's dragon guildmaster Niv Mizzet, whose intellect matched his firepower, both narratively and mechanically. By the time Shards of Alara hit in 2008, dragons were sometimes a little more philosophical. Hellkite Overlord, for example, served as a symbol of Jund's brutal natural law. When Magic the Gathering first took us to Tarkir in 2014, it was a world without dragons. The skeletons of beasts long dead lay scattered across jagged cliffs, storms crackled over empty peaks, and the people had adapted to this silence. They built philosophies from the shadows of dragons. In a world where dragons had perished, their memory was heavy enough to build entire empires on. But then history folded in on itself. Sarkhan Vol, drawn by the echo of ancient storms and the pull of something bigger than himself, changed the past to change the future. He saved Ugin the Spirit Dragon, and in doing so let the dragons of Tarkir live. He did more than save a species, he reshaped a plane. Tarkir Dragonstorm is the culmination of this long narrative arc. The plane feels alive, wild, and dangerous. The dragon tempests roar once again across the sky, birthing scale and flame into a landscape shaped by survival. The full art basic lands in Dragonstorm are not passive environments. They are canvases painted with the dragon's presence. In one, the craggy silhouette of a dragon swoops overhead, casting a shadow long enough to suggest both reverence and fear. In another, we peer directly into the eye of the beast, the mana symbol glowing at its center, suggesting that dragons are not just inhabitants of Tarkir, but intrinsic to its very magic. And this set doesn't merely rehash the old dragons, it reimagines them, evolves them. And yet, despite their power, these dragons aren't omnipotent. Tarkir is still a place of clans, of mortal will, of people who have learned to survive under claw and shadow. The new mechanics of Dragonstorm, like Behold and Omen, reward us for walking alongside dragons, not merely watching them from afar. The set is a mechanical conversation between mortal and mythic. In Tarkir, dragons are not the end of history. They are history, written in fire and wind, revised again and again by those brave enough to challenge fate. Where once they were fossils, they are now future. But what is a dragon? That question doesn't have a single origin point, because dragons appear in some form in nearly every culture. The fascinating part is that most of these cultures developed their dragon myths independently. The dragon, it seems, is a kind of universal archetype, a creature we imagined before we ever met each other. But why? Let's start with the roots. In Western mythology, dragons are usually associated with destruction, greed, and chaos. The typical European dragon, scaled, winged, horned, fire-breathing, was heavily influenced by Christian and pre-Christian imagery. In medieval texts, dragons hoard gold, terrorize villages, and are often slain by heroes, St. George and the Dragon being the classic tale. But even before Christian symbolism, ancient Greeks had serpentine monsters like the Hydra, and Norse mythology gave us Jormungandr, the world serpent. These were not just monsters, they were boundary beings, liminal forces between the known world and the unknown. In Eastern mythology, dragons are nearly the opposite. In Chinese, Korean, and Japanese traditions, dragons are wise, benevolent, and tied to water, weather, and imperial authority. They don't have wings, but they fly through supernatural power. They often resemble elongated serpents with deer-like horns, lion manes, and 5-clawed feet. Chinese dragons are symbols of strength, luck, and control over the elements, especially rain and rivers. Emperors claimed descent from dragons, and their robes, palaces, and rituals were draped in dragon iconography. So, where did the idea for these creatures come from? Anthropologists and mythologists have a few theories. Number 1. Fossils and bones. Ancient people likely found dinosaur or whale bones and interpreted them as remnants of massive dragon-like creatures. Without scientific context, it was natural to imagine them as monsters from myth. Number 2. Natural predators. Humans have an evolutionary fear of snakes, large birds of prey, and big cats. The dragon, as a hybrid creature with wings, fangs, and claws, may be a composite predator, a symbolic embodiment of all the things that once hunted us. Number 3. Fire and flight. Fire was one of the earliest and most powerful discoveries in human history. A creature that can wield it, breathe it, is instantly awe-inspiring and terrifying. Combine that with the ability to fly, something humans could never do unaided, and you have an apex being that transcends earthly boundaries. Number 4. Symbolic needs. Dragons serve narrative and symbolic purposes. They guard treasure, as in Beowulf or The Hobbit, because they represent the fear of unearned power or the temptation of greed. They fly because they represent freedom or divine perspective. They're serpentine because snakes have long been metaphors for death, rebirth, or chaos. Most European dragon myths feature the dragons guarding treasure, suggesting that any would-be adventurers need to walk through fire in order to attain anything of value. The idea is that wherever there are dragons to be confronted, there is gold to be found. Many of these stories also have dragons holding maidens hostage, a storyline that may irk modern sensibilities, but suggests that finding a real romantic relationship also means being brave and contending with risk. These dragons are not interchangeable. They represent the spectrum of human imagination. Some are wise, some are wild. Some bring ruin, others renewal. Some are hoarders of wealth, others guardians of worlds. Yet all of them share a common thread. They are threshold creatures, beings that mark the crossing between safety and the unknown. When a dragon enters the story changes. The stakes rise, the ordinary becomes mythic. And perhaps that is why dragons endure. They are, in every sense, the avatars of transformation. They turn farmers into knights, students into warriors, and exiles into queens. They are the crucibles in which courage is tested, fears are faced, and destinies are forged. In their fire, stories burn brighter. That's why we keep drawing them, painting them, telling stories about them, and casting them in spells. Dragons are the dream of power with a face we recognize, a shape in the smoke. As always, thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please consider liking, subscribing, and donating to my Patreon. Even $1 a month will significantly help my channel and also get your name in the credits of the videos.